Hello and welcome again to What If Natives Won, a video blog and channel about alternate history and American Indians, Native Americans, Indigenous peoples. This is the 27th video of 28 planned ones in this series. My name is Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Blue Corn Comics, editing and putting out a short story collection, What If Natives Won. That's what this video blog and channel are about. There's a huge lack of alternate history written about American Indians, Indigenous people. I've had great success using alternate history to teach my students. Show them absolutely nothing in history was inevitable. It never had to be. The worst of human history is always a conscious choice. How things turn out is based on how evil the evil choose to be, and how well and how strongly good people choose to stand up to them or stop them. The ways things turned out in history took a very specific set of circumstances. Sometimes history can turn on very small things. Change even one and you have an entirely different history, different present, different society. But much of this could change if G.W. Bush or Trump lose wars against Bolivia or Venezuela. A humiliating defeat on the battlefield could make either president lose re-election and strengthen either indigenous leader under attack. Bolivia's Evo Morales, overthrown by far-right Christian fascists, was part of Latin America's pink tide. He began as a farmers' union leader, then head of the movement towards socialism. Morales was the first native president of Bolivia, which has long treated its native majority with contempt and brutality. Natives were not even allowed to vote in Bolivia until 1952. Morales was elected by wide majorities 3 times. Bolivian natives led by Morales had many successes. He fought off a racist secession movement and presided over the fastest growing economy in all Latin America. Natives made up most of his cabinet and won a clear majority of Congress. Native languages were recognized, coca farmers protected. Native symbolism brought international symbols. Bolivian democracy was vibrant. The worst thing he did was build and develop in several regions that were native homelands. In Venezuela, Hugo Chavez was a leftist populist army officer who led 2 failed coups before being elected. He was mixed race, native and black, and came from poverty, and as elected president 3 times, he was a mix of good and bad. But because he was opposed to the U.S. government and U.S. imperialism, he was demonized by American media far more than brutal right-wing leaders like Álvaro Uribe of Colombia, a wealthy white landowner who collaborated with right-wing terrorists, killed over 10,000 civilians, and forced out over 500,000 natives and blacks. Chavez reduced poverty, and especially extreme poverty. He brought education, healthcare, and political and social power to poor, black, native, and mixed Venezuelans. Wealthy and white racist Venezuelans who lost power despised him. The upper middle class turned on him for inflation and crime. They and G.W. Bush tried to overthrow him in 2002. The opposition, including violent street thugs called guarimberos, then tried massive campaigns of sabotage, murdering hundreds of Chavez supporters, getting in street battles with cops and soldiers, capital flight, and propaganda campaigns. They also tried election boycotts, which not surprisingly meant they kept losing elections by huge margins. Chavez remained enormously popular for his many accomplishments, including standing up to the U.S., building regional alliances, and making the nation far more prosperous and equal. Corruption, contrary to false claims, actually dropped. The media and business elite opposition remained free and open despite trying to overthrow him, usually with American aid. Chavez did selectively prosecute the opposition for corruption, but he also made the mistake of relying on oil revenue. Shortly before his death from cancer, oil prices dropped and inflation rose dramatically. His successor, Maduro, had far less of his popularity or charisma. The economy worsened, and so did opposition sabotage and murders of Chavistas. Only when Trump tried to overthrow him and install a puppet named Juan Guaido did Maduro gain the support of most Venezuelans. This was not the only time Trump wanted to overthrow Maduro. In 2018, he proposed a U.S. invasion. American generals talked him out of it. He proposed invading Venezuela again at a meeting of the Organization of American States. Only after every single other Latin American president opposed it did Trump finally back down. Instead, he imposed a blockade that has killed at least 40,000 Venezuelans. What if, to distract from their failures, G.W. Bush or Trump launch attacks or warfare against Bolivia or Venezuela? Bolivia is the less likely of the two. It is landlocked, with high Andes Mountains to the west, Amazon jungle to the north. Presidents Lula and then Rousseff of Brazil were both leftists, unlikely to allow U.S. bombers or troops through their territory. President Kirchner of Argentina to the south was also a leftist and equally unlikely. One of the other options left for Bush or Trump are to send American guerrillas, as the U.S. government did when it killed Che Guevara. But guerrillas are unlikely to overthrow Morales or even cause serious problems. In our own time, Guevara was killed with the help of the Bolivian military. Bush or Trump could also more strongly support the racist secession movement in East Bolivia, the region with higher numbers of whites and mestizos. The secession movement tried to break away the eastern half of Bolivia. There were non-binding referendums with low turnout. Secession rioters killed several dozen Morales supporters, blocked roads, and secession terrorists blew up gas pipelines. Morales put one province under martial law, and the military arrested suspects. Morales also expelled the U.S. ambassador, blaming Bush for orchestrating secession. If Bush had backed secession more openly or strongly, it's still likely to fail. In spite of these racist extremists, Morales gathered both the public and military behind him. Bush or Trump could also support a military and fascist coup much sooner. But a failed coup or secession helps Morales, makes him appear stronger. Bolivians will rally to him as the man who stood up to the U.S. If G.W. Bush wanted an invasion of Venezuela, this would be during the Iraq and Afghan wars. The U.S. military is already short of troops. Troop shortages were high because the wars were very unpopular. Bush had to resort to mercenaries, often mislabeled contractors, who actually outnumbered U.S. troops. The most Bush could do was bomb Venezuela, use the Navy to blockade, or use missile strikes. But Chavez was very popular. U.S. attacks would rally Venezuelans around him even more. He has not just a large army, but dozens of Russian fighters and hundreds of Russian missiles that can shoot down U.S. planes and sink U.S. ships. For anything but long-range missile and drone attacks, Bush can't win without heavy losses. Even Venezuelan military losses only strengthen Chavez politically. What if Trump had overruled his generals, ignored other Latin American presidents, and invaded Venezuela anyway in 2018? Venezuela is the size of Texas, with massive jungles, mountain ranges, and an army and militias of 500,000, and is allies with 4 other Latin American nations. The working class and non-whites mostly support Chavismo. Mostly middle and upper class whites oppose it and would ally with the U.S. invasion. This U.S. invasion would become a long and incredibly destructive civil war. In neighboring Colombia, their civil war killed almost 250,000 and had almost 6 million refugees and lasted 54 years. Trump will be remembered like Lyndon Johnson for dragging the U.S. into a useless, failed, and deeply unpopular war. His defeat in the next election is guaranteed. His impeachment far more likely, since his popularity would sharply drop. Even if Trump only bombs Venezuela or blockades using the Navy, again Russian-made missiles bring down U.S. planes and sink U.S. Navy ships. Trump suffers a humiliating defeat for anything but long-range missile and drone strikes. The public rallies around Maduro, strengthening him just as Trump's failed coup in 2019 did. U.S. presidents defeated by native or mixed ancestry Latin American presidents in nations with majority native or mixed ancestry people. These do count as native victory. This is the end of the 27th video. I look forward to your comments and questions and will answer them as often as I can. But racism, genocide denial, childish behavior, and personal attacks get deleted. I do recognize some questions will be asked in ignorance, because much of what I point to are new to most people. They were never taught about this. They've been raised in denial, since denying indigenous genocides is taught in almost all public schools. Please repost freely, like, subscribe, share, and comment. I'll post again in about a week. This has been What If Natives Won video blog and channel.